Maya defeated the Mark 12 combat droid after a battle that lasted nearly an hour and left her exhausted but victorious. Santos declared her training complete, but warned her that using her new skills publicly would change everything at the Academy. They both knew that her secret could not be kept forever, and Maya had already begun thinking about how she might prove herself to the other cadets and instructors. The opportunity came sooner than expected when Commander Varix announced the annual Trial of Excellence. The prestigious competition was held every year to showcase the Academy's top cadets to military recruiters from across the galaxy. It was the most important event of the academic year, and cadets who performed well often received immediate offers for advanced positions in various galactic military organizations. Maya listened to the announcement with growing excitement until Commander Varix specifically mentioned that she would not be participating in the combat demonstrations due to her sparring ban. Instead, she was assigned to present a theoretical paper on comparative military ethics, which was considered one of the least impressive categories in the competition. The unfairness of the situation made Maya angry in ways that she had not felt since her first weeks at the Academy. She had spent months training in secret and developing skills that surpassed most of her classmates, but she was still being treated like a dangerous animal who could not be trusted around other cadets. Something inside her snapped, and she decided that she could not accept this treatment anymore. Against Santos's advice, Maya requested a private meeting with Commander Varix. The Zentari officer received her in his office, which was decorated with awards and commendations from his decades of military service. His silver skin seemed to shimmer in the soft lighting, and his large eyes studied Maya with the kind of attention that made her feel like a specimen under examination. "I want to propose an alternative demonstration for the Trial of Excellence," Maya said before the commander could speak. "Instead of presenting a paper, I would like to face the Academy's combat droids in a public exhibition." Commander Varix leaned back in his chair and considered her request. Maya could see that he was weighing multiple factors, including Academy, regulations, and the political implications of allowing a banned cadet to participate in combat demonstrations. "You understand that if you fail this exhibition, the consequences will be severe," the commander said slowly. "I would have no choice but to recommend your immediate expulsion from the Academy." Maya nodded and tried to keep her voice steady. "I understand the risks, but I also believe that I deserve a chance to prove that my ban was unnecessary." Before the commander could respond, the office door opened and Cadet Lisa Park entered without being invited. The hybrid cadet had obviously been listening outside, and Maya realized that Lisa saw this as an opportunity to embarrass her publicly. "Commander, I could not help but overhear," Lisa said with false politeness. "If Maya wants to demonstrate her combat abilities, perhaps we could make the challenge more interesting." Lisa proposed that Maya should face the Academy's most advanced combat droids while blindfolded to prove that her abilities were more than just brute force. Other cadets who had gathered in the corridor outside began adding their own suggestions, and soon the simple exhibition had turned into the most anticipated event in Academy history. "If she can defeat 5 advanced combat droids without being able to see them, I will publicly acknowledge that humans deserve our respect," Lisa announced loudly enough for everyone in the corridor to hear. "But if she fails, she should admit that Deathworlders have no place in civilized military organizations." Maya felt trapped by the escalating stakes, but she knew that backing down now would confirm every negative stereotype about human cowardice. She looked at Commander Varix and nodded her acceptance of the challenge. The news of Maya's upcoming demonstration spread through the Academy faster than she would have thought possible. Within hours, every cadet and instructor seemed to know about the challenge, and opinions were divided between those who thought she was brave and those who thought she was suicidal. The betting pools that started forming suggested that most people expected her to fail spectacularly. Kyle Barnes approached Maya in the cafeteria the day before the demonstration, and his expression was a mixture of concern and embarrassment. "You do not have to do this," he said quietly. "No one will think less of you if you withdraw the challenge." Maya looked at the human cadet who had spent months distancing himself from her and tried to decide whether his concern was genuine. "You mean no one will think less of you if I do not embarrass our species publicly?" Kyle's face reddened, but he did not deny her accusation. "I just think that this competition is designed to make you fail. Lisa Park has been planning something like this since you arrived at the academy." Maya appreciated the warning, but she had already committed to the challenge, and she knew that withdrawing would be worse than failing. At least if she failed while trying her best, she could leave the academy with some dignity intact. Commander. Varix announced the terms of the challenge to the entire academy during the evening meal. Maya would face 5 of the Academy's most advanced combat droids in the main arena while wearing a blindfold. The droids would be armed with non-lethal weapons, but they would be programmed to use full combat protocols instead of the limited training modes used in regular classes. The political implications of the challenge became clear when delegations from various galactic military organizations began arriving at the Academy. Representatives from the Zentari High Command and the Kovash Defense Council requested permission to observe the demonstration, and Maya realized that her performance would influence policy decisions that affected all of humanity. Santos found Maya in the maintenance tunnels on the night before the challenge, and his expression was more serious than she had ever seen it. "Are you absolutely certain about this decision?" he asked. "Once you step into that arena, everything will change regardless of whether you win or lose." Maya had been thinking about the same question for days, and she had finally reached a conclusion. That felt right. "I cannot spend the rest of my life hiding what I am capable of. If humans are going to be part of the galactic community, then someone has to show them what we can really do." Santos nodded and handed her a small device that looked like a communication earpiece. "This will let me monitor your vital signs during the fight. If something goes wrong, I can shut down the droids remotely, but doing so would disqualify your performance." They spent the night reviewing everything that Maya had learned during her secret training. Santos reminded her about the importance of trusting her instincts and using her enhanced senses to track opponents that she could not see. He also warned her that the Academy's advanced droids were programmed with combat data that included human fighting patterns. "They will know how humans normally fight," Santos explained, "but they will not expect someone who has trained to use abilities that most humans do not even know they possess." Maya tried to sleep, but her mind kept racing with thoughts about everything that could go wrong. She imagined herself falling spectacularly in front of hundreds of observers and confirming every negative stereotype about human unpredictability. She also imagined succeeding beyond everyone's expectations and finally earning the respect that she had been seeking since her first day at the Academy. When morning came, Maya felt more nervous than she had ever been in her life, but she also felt ready. Months of secret training had prepared her for exactly this kind of challenge, and she knew that she was as capable as any cadet in Academy history. The question was whether she could perform under pressure while being watched by people who expected her to fail. Maya walked toward the main arena and could hear the sounds of hundreds of spectators taking their seats. Through the preparation area windows, she could see cadets and instructors from dozens of different species, and she spotted several individuals who were obviously high-ranking military officials from various galactic governments. In the center of the arena, 5 massive combat droids stood in perfect formation. Their weapon systems gleamed under the bright lights, and their sensors tracked every movement in the surrounding area. Maya had never seen droids this advanced before, and she realized that Santos had been protecting her by limiting her training to older models. Commander Varrix's voice echoed through the arena as he announced the terms of the challenge. Maya stepped forward and accepted the blindfold that would determine whether she had a future in the galactic military or would be returning to Earth in disgrace. As the thick black cloth covered her eyes, she heard the crowd fall silent and realized that everything she had worked for was about to be decided in the next few minutes. Maya began visiting the historical combat archive every night after her regular classes ended. Santos was always there waiting for her with a new challenge or a different type of training that pushed her abilities in ways the Academy's regular program never did. The combat droids became progressively more difficult as her skills improved, and soon she was facing machines that would have terrified her just weeks before. The Level 5 droid moved like liquid mercury and could predict her attacks before she made them. Its combat programming included data from dozens of different species, and it seemed to know exactly how humans fought before Maya even began moving. Santos watched from the control console and called out advice when she struggled with particularly difficult opponents. "Stop thinking like a cadet," he shouted as Maya dodged a series of energy blasts. "Think like a hunter. Your ancestors survived by reading patterns and predicting behavior. Use those instincts instead of trying to remember textbook techniques." Maya began to understand what he meant as she spent more time fighting the advanced droids. There was something deep in her mind that seemed to activate during combat situations. It was like an ancient part of her brain that could process multiple threats simultaneously and calculate distances and timing without conscious thought. When she stopped trying to fight like the alien cadets and started trusting these deeper instincts, her performance improved dramatically. The zero-gravity training was especially challenging because none of the alien species at the Academy had evolved in environments where they might suddenly lose their connection to solid ground. Humans had developed superior spatial awareness because their ancestors had spent millions of years climbing trees and navigating three-dimensional environments. Maya found that she could orient herself in weightless conditions much faster than she would have expected. Santos explained that this was another example of human advantages that the Academy's training programs completely ignored. Most species evolved on worlds where up and down were constant facts of life. Humans evolved as climbers and swimmers, and we developed brains that can handle complex spatial relationships. In real combat situations, that kind of adaptability can mean the difference between life and death. The combat scenarios became increasingly complex as Maya's training progressed. She fought multiple opponents simultaneously and learned to use the environment as a weapon. Santos programmed the droids to work together in ways that forced her to develop tactics that no Academy textbook had ever described. She learned to use damaged droids as shields and to turn their own weapons against each other. After a month of secret training, Santos introduced the most challenging test yet. He handed Maya a thick black cloth and explained that she would need to fight while completely blind. The idea seemed impossible at first, but Santos insisted that humans had better hearing and spatial awareness than most galactic species realized. "Your species evolved as both predators and prey," he explained as he helped her secure the blindfold. You developed senses that could detect threats from any direction, even when you could not see them. Most aliens rely heavily on vision because their homeworlds were safer environments where ambush predators were rare. Fighting blind was frustrating and terrifying at first. Maya stumbled around the training mat and walked directly into attacks that she should have avoided easily. But gradually, she began to notice sounds and air movements that she had never paid attention to before. The combat droids made tiny noises as their joints moved, and their weapon systems created subtle changes in air pressure when they charged up. Santos encouraged her to trust senses that she had never relied on before. Listen to the way the droid's footsteps change when it prepares to attack. Feel the air move when its weapons extend. Smell the ozone from its energy systems. Your brain can process all of this information if you let it. After 2 weeks of blindfolded training, Maya successfully defeated her first level 3 droid without being able to see it. The achievement felt even more satisfying than her early victories because it proved that humans possessed capabilities that went far beyond simple physical strength. Santos was visibly proud as he watched her remove the blindfold and look at the disabled machine. Meanwhile, Maya's performance in her regular academy classes began to suffer. Without access to practical combat training, she was falling behind in subjects that required hands-on experience with weapons and tactics. Her theoretical knowledge remained strong, but she could not demonstrate the practical applications that her instructors expected. Cadet Lisa Park, who led the top combat class, made several public comments about Maya's declining performance. Lisa was a hybrid between human and Zentari genetics, and she seemed to take personal pleasure in pointing out Maya's weaknesses during group exercises. It is unfortunate that some cadets cannot adapt to civilized training methods, Lisa announced during a tactical studies seminar. Perhaps those who rely on primitive instincts should consider whether military service is appropriate for them. Maya wanted to respond, but she knew that defending herself would only draw more attention to her situation. Instead, she focused on her secret training sessions and tried to ignore the whispers and pointed looks from other cadets. Santos noticed her frustration and tried to help her understand the larger context of what she was experiencing. "I went through the same thing when I first joined the Galactic military," he told her during one of their training sessions. The other species did not know what to do with humans who fought differently than everyone else. They were afraid of us because we were unpredictable, and they preferred soldiers who followed standardized procedures. Santos showed Maya records from the Hegemony Wars, where human military units had saved countless alien lives through tactics that other species considered reckless or impossible. Human soldiers had charged into situations that would have been suicide missions for other species, and had succeeded because they could adapt to changing conditions faster than anyone expected. The problem is that the Academy only teaches the sanitized version of military history, Santos explained. They focus on the battles that were won through careful planning and superior technology. They do not talk about the times when human instincts and improvisation made the difference between victory and defeat. Maya began to doubt whether she belonged in the military at all. The constant criticism from other cadets and the restrictions on her training made her wonder if she should just give up and return to Earth. She confided these doubts to Santos during one particularly difficult training session. "Maybe they are right about humans being too violent for civilized society," she said as she sat on the training mat after defeating 3 level 7 droids simultaneously. "Maybe I should just accept that I do not belong here." Santos sat down beside her, and his expression became serious. "Do you know why I really stay here in this forgotten archive instead of teaching regular classes?" Maya shook her head and waited for him to continue. 20 years ago, I was the Academy's most decorated combat instructor. I trained cadets from dozens of different species, and my students had the highest survival rates in actual combat situations. But I made the mistake of teaching them to fight like humans instead of like their own species. Santos explained that he had been quietly transferred to maintenance duties after several alien instructors complained that his methods were too aggressive. The Academy preferred instructors who taught standardized techniques that worked adequately for all species rather than specialized approaches that might be more effective but were harder to control. They did not fire me because they could not argue with my results, Santos continued, but they made sure that I could not influence any more cadets with my dangerous ideas about embracing species-specific advantages. Maya looked around the abandoned training facility and realized that Santos had been as isolated as she was. The difference was that he had found a way to use his isolation productively instead of just accepting defeat. His willingness to train her in secret was not just about helping one struggling cadet. It was about preserving knowledge and capabilities that the Academy was trying to eliminate. "You have mastered blindfolded combat against multiple opponents," Santos said as he stood up and walked to the control console. "You can fight in zero gravity, and you can adapt to situations that would overwhelm most Academy graduates. You are ready for the ultimate test." Santos activated a control sequence that Maya had never seen before. Hidden panels in the walls slid, open to reveal dozens of combat droids in storage positions. These machines looked different from the ones she had been fighting. They were larger and more heavily armed, and their designs suggested they had been built for actual warfare rather than training exercises. "These are Mark 12 combat droids from the Hegemony Wars," Santos explained. "They were designed to fight against entire squads of soldiers, and each one has enough firepower to level a small building. No Academy cadet has faced one of these machines in over 30 years. Maya felt her heart rate increase as she looked at the massive droids. They were clearly designed to kill rather than just disable, and she could see weapon systems that looked like they belonged on military vehicles. Maya could not sleep again, so she decided to explore the Academy during the quiet hours when most cadets were resting. She had discovered that the station was much larger than what they showed to students during orientation, and there were entire sections that seemed to be forgotten or unused. The maintenance tunnels were especially interesting because they were built for automated repair systems and were too small for most alien species to navigate comfortably. She crawled through a narrow passage that led from the residential deck down toward the lower levels of the station. The tunnel was barely wide enough for her shoulders, and she had to move carefully to avoid the various pipes and cables that ran along the walls. A Zentari would never fit through here, and an Etherian would have to fold themselves into impossible shapes just to get started. Even Kyle Barnes, who was shorter than Maya, would probably struggle with some of the tighter spaces. After 20 minutes of crawling, Maya found herself in a maintenance shaft that opened into a corridor she had never seen before. The lights here were dimmer than in the main Academy sections, and there was dust on the floor that suggested very few people ever came this way. The walls were marked with symbols that looked like old Galactic Standard, but in a style that was at least 50 years out of date. Maya walked quietly down the corridor and tried to guess what this section might have been used for. The doors she passed were all sealed with old-style locks that required physical keys instead of the biometric scanners used everywhere else in the Academy. Some of the doors had small windows, but they were too dirty to see through clearly. At the end of the corridor, Maya found a door that was slightly open, and she could see light coming from inside. She approached carefully and listened for any sounds that might indicate someone was there. When she heard nothing, she pushed the door open just enough to peek inside. The room beyond was enormous and filled with equipment that Maya did not recognize. There were training mats on the floor and weapon racks along the walls, but everything looked old and unused. In the center of the space stood several large machines that looked like they might be combat training devices, but they were built in a style that Maya had never seen before. "You can come in," said a voice from somewhere in the shadows. "I have been wondering when someone would finally find this place." Maya stepped into the room and looked around for the source of the voice. After a moment, she spotted a human man sitting at a control console in the far corner. He was older than anyone else she had seen at the academy, with gray hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of years of experience. He wore a maintenance uniform, but something about the way he carried himself suggested he was much more than a simple repair technician. "I am Professor Eli Santos," the man said as he stood up from his chair. "Though I suppose most people here just think of me as the old human who keeps the forgotten systems running." Maya introduced herself and explained that she had been exploring the maintenance tunnels because she could not sleep. Santos nodded as if this made perfect sense and gestured for her to look around the room. "This is the Historical Combat Archive," Santos explained. "Back when I was a young officer, this was where cadets learned to fight against real opponents instead of the sanitized training programs they use today. These combat droids were programmed with data from actual wars, and they fought like enemies who wanted to kill you." Maya examined one of the dormant machines more closely. It was humanoid in shape, but clearly designed to be much stronger and faster than any organic species. The weapons mounted on its arms looked like they could do serious damage, and there were scorch marks on the training mats that suggested this room had seen real combat. "Why is everything shut down?" Maya asked as she traced her finger along a blast mark on the nearest wall. Santos sat back down and his expression became sad. "The Academy decided that this kind of training was too dangerous after several cadets were seriously injured. They said that modern warfare did not require such brutal preparation and that we should focus on energy shields and psychic combat instead. So they moved everything to the upper levels and left me here to make sure the old systems did not break down completely." Maya could not help but notice that Santos was human and wondered if that had anything to do with why he was stuck maintaining old equipment instead of teaching active classes. She had heard rumors that there were other human instructors at the academy, but she had never met any of them, and wondered if they were all hidden away in forgotten corners like this one. "I heard about what happened in your sparring class," Santos continued. "Breaking that Kovash cadet's arm was not your fault. These modern training methods do not account for the fact that different species have different capabilities. They try to make everyone fight the same way instead of teaching them to use their natural advantages." Maya felt a surge of relief at hearing someone finally understand what she had been going through. For weeks, she had been surrounded by people who treated her like a dangerous animal. But Santos spoke like he actually knew what it was like to be human in a galaxy full of more fragile species. "I have been trying to hold back," Maya admitted. "But sometimes I forget how much stronger I am compared to them. On Earth, I would be considered average, but here I feel like I might break everything I touch." Santos laughed and the sound echoed off the walls of the empty training room. "That is exactly what I used to think when I first joined the Galactic military 20 years ago. I spent so much energy trying to be gentle that I forgot how to be effective. It took me a long time to learn that being strong is not something to apologize for." He stood up and walked over to one of the combat droids. With a few quick adjustments to the control panel, the machine came to life with a soft humming sound. Its sensors glowed red as it scanned the room, and its weapons systems extended from hidden compartments in its arms. "This is a Level 3 combat droid," Santos explained. It is programmed with combat data from the Outer Rim conflicts, and it will try to disable you using non-lethal force. Most Academy cadets would need months of preparation before they could face one of these machines. Maya looked at the droid and felt her heart rate increase. This was the first time in weeks that she had been offered a real challenge instead of theoretical exercises and safety demonstrations. The machine was obviously dangerous, but it was also obviously designed to test real combat skills instead of just teaching cadets how to avoid hurting each other. "What do you want me to do?" Maya asked as she moved to the center of the training mat. Santos smiled and walked back to the control console. "I want you to fight it like a human instead of like a cadet who is afraid of her own strength. Use everything that evolution gave your species and stop worrying about being too rough." The combat droid moved forward with mechanical precision, and Maya could see its sensors tracking her movements. She had never faced anything like this before, but somehow it felt more natural than the careful sparring matches she had been forced to endure with other cadets. This machine was not fragile, and it was not afraid of her. It was designed to take whatever she could give it and respond with equal force. Maya circled the droid and tried to find an opening in its defenses. The machine moved faster than she expected, and its first attack nearly caught her off guard. A metal arm swung toward her head, and she barely managed to duck under it before rolling away from a follow-up strike. For the next several minutes, Maya found herself in the kind of fight she had been craving since she arrived at the academy. The droid was strong enough that she did not have to hold back and smart enough that she had to use actual tactics instead of just overpowering her opponent. When she finally managed to grab one of its arms and twist it out of its socket, she felt a satisfaction that had been missing from her training for weeks. The droid shut down automatically when its arm was disabled, and Santos applauded from his position at the control console. "That was exactly what I wanted to see. You fought like a predator instead of like a victim." Maya was breathing hard, but she felt more alive than she had since arriving at the academy. "That was incredible. Is there any way I could train here regularly?" Santos considered her request for a long moment before nodding slowly. "I think we can arrange something, but it would have to be our secret. If Commander Varix found out that I was training a cadet who is banned from sparring, there would be serious consequences for both of us." Maya did not hesitate to agree. She had been looking for a way to prove that she belonged at the academy, and this might be her only chance. Santos showed her a schedule where she could use the training room without being detected, and explained how to access the maintenance tunnels safely. As she prepared to leave, Santos called her back for one final piece of advice. "Remember that being human is not something to overcome. It is something to embrace. Your species survived on a death world by being stronger and more adaptable than anything else on your planet. Do not let anyone convince you that those traits are weaknesses." Maya crawled back through the maintenance tunnels with her mind racing with possibilities. For the first time since breaking Crix's arm, she felt like she might have a future at the academy after all. Maya Rodriguez sat alone at the metal table in the academy cafeteria and watched the other cadets through the large windows that looked out onto the training grounds. The Zentari moved like flowing water as they practiced their combat forms, and their silver skin caught the artificial sunlight that streamed down from the station's light panels. She could see their graceful movements as they twisted and turned in patterns that looked more like dancing than fighting. The Kovash cadets stood in perfect rows and extended their long fingers toward floating targets that glowed bright blue when their energy touched them. Their tall bodies never moved, but somehow they could hit targets that were 50 meters away just by thinking about it. The Etherian cadets were the most amazing to watch because they could float in the air without any machines or devices. Their pale bodies drifted through the training course like ghosts, and they barely seemed to touch the ground as they moved between obstacles that would be impossible for most species to reach. Maya had been watching them for 3 weeks now, and she still could not understand how they made it look so easy. She picked at her food tray without really eating anything. The Academy served food that was safe for all species, but it never tasted like anything from Earth. Everything here was bland and processed to make sure it would not poison any of the dozen different alien species that attended the school. Maya missed the spicy food from her home in New Mexico and the way her grandmother made tamales that could make your eyes water from across the room. "Mind if we sit here?" asked a voice behind her. Maya turned to see 3 cadets from her tactical studies class. There was Zix, who was a Kovash with the typical long limbs and gray skin of his species. Next to him stood Vera, who was an Etherian and so tall that she had to duck her head to avoid hitting the ceiling panels. The 3rd cadet was someone Maya had never spoken to before, but she recognized him as one of the Zentari from the Advanced Combat Program. Maya nodded and gestured to the empty chairs around her table. The 3 aliens sat down carefully, and she noticed how they all kept their distance from her. Even when they were trying to be friendly, there was still fear in their movements. "We heard about what happened in sparring class," Zix said in his careful way of speaking that made every word sound like he was reading from a textbook. "We wanted you to know that we do not think you meant to hurt Cadet Crix." Maya felt her stomach twist into knots. 3 weeks ago, she had been paired with Crix for routine sparring practice. The Kovash cadet was supposed to be learning how to defend against physical attacks since his species relied mostly on their energy manipulation abilities. Maya had been trying to show him a simple takedown move that human cadets learned in basic training. She had grabbed his arm and twisted it in what should have been a harmless demonstration, but the sound of his bones breaking had echoed through the entire training hall. "I know you did not mean it," Vera added in her musical voice that sounded like wind chimes. "Your species is just very strong compared to ours." Maya wanted to tell them that she had been holding back as much as she could. She wanted to explain that on Earth she would have been considered average in strength and that there were humans who could lift twice as much as she could. She wanted them to understand that she had spent her whole life learning to be gentle with things that were more fragile than her. But she also knew that nothing she said would make any difference. "Thank you for saying that," Maya replied instead. "I hope Crix is healing well." The Zentari cadet, whose name Maya did not know, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Commander Varix says you cannot spar with other cadets anymore. That must be hard for someone from a warrior species." Maya almost laughed at that. Humans were not really a warrior species any more than any other species was. They had wars and conflicts, just like everyone else in the galaxy, but they also had art and music and poetry. They had families and love and all the same things that made other species civilized. But somehow, when the galactic community looked at Earth, they only saw the dangerous parts. Earth was classified as a death world because of its high gravity and extreme weather, and the fact that almost everything on the planet could kill you if you were not careful. Maya had grown up dodging hurricanes that could flatten entire cities and avoiding creatures that most aliens would consider mythical monsters. The gravity on Earth was 0.2 units higher than galactic standard, which meant that humans who grew up there developed much stronger muscles and denser bones than most other species. "I am managing," Maya said simply. She did not want to talk about how frustrated she felt or how she spent hours every day in the gym trying to work off energy that she used to burn in combat training. She did not mention that she felt like a caged animal most of the time, or that she was starting to wonder if she had made a mistake coming to the academy. The three aliens finished their meals quickly and excused themselves with polite nods. Maya watched them walk away and noticed how they moved closer together once they were a safe distance from her table. She had seen that same behavior from other cadets over the past few weeks. They would approach her in small groups to show that they were not afraid, but they always left as quickly as possible. Maya finished her meal alone and walked toward her next class, which was Galactic History with Professor Keening, who was a Zentari, scholar with more knowledge in her head than most species had in their entire libraries. The corridors of the academy were wide and tall to accommodate all the different species, and Maya always felt small walking through them, even though she was taller than average for a human female. As she passed a group of cadets near the lift, tubes, she heard one of them mention her name. She slowed her pace and pretended to check her datapad while she listened to their conversation. "I heard the human broke 3 bones in Crix's arm," whispered a Kavash cadet. "My cousin says humans can snap a Kavash limb like a dry branch." "That is why they banned her from sparring," replied an Etherian voice. "Commander Varix is probably worried she might kill someone by accident." "I do not understand why they let Deathworlders into the academy anyway," said a third voice that Maya recognized as belonging to Kyle Barnes, who was another human cadet. "Not all humans are like her. I grew up on Colony 7 where the gravity is normal and we learn to be civilized. Earth humans are different. They are more like animals than people sometimes." Maya felt her face burn with anger and embarrassment. Kyle was supposed to be on her side since they were both human, but instead he was throwing her under the transport to make himself look better to the alien cadets. She wanted to march over there and tell him exactly what she thought of his comments, but she knew it would only make things worse. Instead, she hurried past them toward the lift tube and pretended she had not heard anything. The rest of the day passed slowly, and Maya found herself struggling to concentrate on her classes. By the time evening came, she was exhausted from pretending that everything was fine and that she did not care about being treated like a dangerous animal. She went back to her small quarters and lay on her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling panels that hummed softly as they recycled the station's air. Maya thought about her family back on Earth and wondered if they would understand why she was having such a hard time. Her parents had been so proud when she was accepted to the academy, and her little brother had bragged to all his friends that his sister was going to be a galactic officer. She did not want to disappoint them by giving up, but she also did not know how much longer she could handle being an outcast. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind kept racing with thoughts about tomorrow and the day after that and all the days that would follow where she would have to prove over and over again that she was not a monster. Maya had come to the academy hoping to show that humans could be more than just violent Deathworlders, but now she was starting to think that maybe that was all she would ever be allowed to be. Maya stood in the center of the arena with the blindfold secured tightly around her eyes and listened to the absolute silence that had fallen over the crowd. She could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching her and waiting to see whether the dangerous human would succeed or fail spectacularly. The 5 advanced combat droids activated simultaneously, and their sensors began tracking her movements with mechanical precision. The first attack came faster than Maya expected, but her enhanced hearing caught the subtle sound of servos engaging, and she rolled away from a burst of energy that would have stunned her instantly. The arena floor was smooth metal, and she could feel vibrations through her feet as the massive droids moved into attack positions around her. Maya had learned during her training with Santos that human spatial awareness was far superior to what most galactic species possessed. Her ancestors had developed these abilities during millions of years of avoiding ambush predators and navigating complex three-dimensional environments. Now she used those same instincts to track 5 opponents that she could not see. The second droid attacked from her left, and Maya could smell the ozone generated by its charging weapon systems. She ducked under a sweeping arm and grabbed the machine's weapon assembly before twisting it out of alignment. The crowd gasped as sparks flew from the damaged systems, but Maya was already moving toward her next target. Fighting blind required her to trust senses that the Academy had never taught her to use. She could hear the subtle differences in the way each droid's joints moved, and she began to recognize their individual attack patterns. The third machine was more aggressive than the others, and its energy weapons created distinctive changes in air pressure that she could feel against her skin. Maya used the damaged first droid as a shield when the remaining 4 machines coordinated their attacks. Energy blasts meant for her struck the disabled machine instead, and she could hear components exploding as friendly fire took out systems that she could never have reached herself. Santos had taught her that superior tactics could overcome superior firepower, and now she was proving that lesson in front of the entire Academy. The 4th and 5th droids tried to flank her, but Maya had been expecting this maneuver since the battle began. She leaped onto the back of the nearest machine and used its own momentum to redirect its attack toward its companion. The sound of metal striking metal echoed through the arena as the 2 droids collided and became tangled in each other's weapon systems. Maya dismounted from the damaged droid and turned toward the final opponent, which had been hanging back and analyzing her fighting patterns. This machine was clearly the most advanced of the group, and it had learned from watching her defeat the others. But Maya had also been learning, and she now understood exactly how these droids thought and moved. The final battle lasted only 2 minutes, but it felt like hours to Maya as she used every technique that Santos had taught her. She feinted left and attacked right, and used the droid's own programming against it by presenting targets that looked vulnerable but were actually traps. When she finally disabled the last machine by yanking out its primary power coupling, the arena erupted in stunned silence. Maya removed her blindfold and looked around at the 5 disabled combat droids that surrounded her. Their weapon systems were dark, and their sensors no longer tracked her movements. She had not just defeated them, but had dismantled them with an efficiency that left even the military observers speechless. The silence lasted for almost 10 seconds before Commander Varix began to applaud slowly. His clapping was joined by other instructors, and then by cadets who had watched something that they had never imagined was possible. Soon, the entire arena was filled with applause, and Maya realized that she had not just won a challenge, but had changed how everyone thought about human capabilities. Cadet Lisa Park approached Maya in the center of the arena, and her expression was a mixture of shock and grudging respect. The hybrid cadet had clearly expected Maya to fail, and her entire worldview had been challenged by what she had just witnessed. "I owe you an apology," Lisa said loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "I never understood what Deathworld evolution really meant until today. You have earned my respect, and the respect of everyone here." Kyle Barnes was the next cadet to approach, and Maya could see genuine shame in his expression. The human who had spent months distancing himself from her now looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "I was wrong about Earth humans," Kyle admitted. "I spent so much time trying to prove that I was different from you that I forgot what we could accomplish when we embrace our heritage instead of running from it." Other cadets began approaching Maya and asking questions about human training methods instead of avoiding her like they had for months. The Zentari wanted to know how she had tracked multiple opponents without seeing them, and the Kovash were amazed by her ability to use damaged enemies as weapons against their companions. Military recruiters immediately began competing for Maya's attention and offering positions that she had never dreamed would be available to her. Commander Varix announced that all restrictions on her training were immediately lifted and that she would be offered a position as a combat instructor upon graduation. But the most meaningful moment came when Santos emerged from the crowd and walked onto the arena floor. The old professor had tears in his eyes as he embraced Maya and told her how proud he was of what she had accomplished. "You did not just win a fight today," Santos said quietly. "You opened a door that can never be closed again. Future human, cadets will never have to face the isolation that you endured." Maya realized that her journey had never been about proving that she was not dangerous. It had been about proving that her particular kind of strength had value in the galactic community. She had learned to accept that humans were different, and even frightening to some species, but that difference was an asset rather than a weakness. Commander Varix approached Maya and Santos with a formal expression that suggested he had important news to share. "I have just received a communication from the Galactic Council," he announced. "They have approved the formation of the first integrated human combat unit in Galactic Fleet history." The crowd erupted in cheers as the commander explained that Maya's demonstration had convinced the council that human military capabilities were too valuable to waste through restrictive policies. The new unit would be designed specifically to take advantage of human adaptability and would serve as a model for future integration efforts. Maya was offered command of the new unit, but she surprised everyone by requesting permission to finish her education at the academy first. She wanted to complete the instructor training program and help develop new curriculum that would prepare future human cadets for military service without forcing them to hide their natural abilities. Over the following weeks, Maya found herself teaching mixed-species combat classes where alien cadets learned to incorporate human tactical thinking into their own fighting styles. She was no longer the isolated Deathworlder, but had become a bridge between human capabilities and galactic military doctrine. The Academy established new training protocols based on Maya's experience, and Santos was brought out of retirement to head the Human Integration Program. The Forgotten Combat Archive was reopened and updated with modern equipment while preserving the training methods that had proven so effective. Maya received a message from Earth congratulating her on her achievements and informing her that the Galactic Council had approved expanded human participation in military academies throughout the galaxy. Her name had become associated with the principle that diversity of capabilities strengthened military organizations rather than weakening them. 6 months after her blindfolded demonstration, Maya stood in the same arena where she had changed galactic policy and watched a new class of human cadets begin their training. These students would never face the discrimination and isolation that had defined her early academy experience because she had proven that human differences were strengths rather than flaws. Santos joined her in watching the new cadets, and his expression was one of satisfaction at seeing his life's work finally recognized. "The Rodriguez Protocol is being implemented at military academies across the galaxy," he told Maya. "Your name will be remembered as the cadet who taught the galaxy that strength comes in many forms." Maya smiled as she watched human and alien cadets training together and learning from each other instead of fearing each other. She had come to the academy hoping to prove that humans could be more than Deathworld barbarians and had ended up proving something far more important. The galaxy was stronger when it embraced diversity, rather than trying to force everyone into identical patterns. The final scene showed Maya leading a graduation ceremony where human and alien officers received their commissions together. As she watched the new officers take their oaths. Maya knew that she had accomplished something that would benefit generations of humans who would follow in her footsteps. The door she had opened would never close, and the galaxy would never again underestimate what humans could accomplish when they were allowed to be themselves.